Welcome back to my channel, and today I'll be discussing about the third chapter from the class 8 NCERT. And before I begin, I would like to recap what we have already covered in the previous chapter. We saw that how the Britishers they started meddling into the internal affairs of the regional states which emerged after the fall of the early Mughals, and especially when in 1707 the Aurangzeb as an emperor he died, and later on how there were some regional powers which emerged, but at the same time they faced tough competition from the Britishers. For example, I discussed about the Mysore, I discussed about the Awadh, I discussed about what was the state of Bengal, okay, and we saw that how the Nawab Sirajuddaulah he was really livid with the Britishers, that how they were meddling into the internal situations into the Bengal. So in this chapter we'll be talking about how the Britishers started ruling the countryside, a company which came solely to do the business, how they started ruling the entire country. So what happened that in 1765 and 12th of August the company becomes the Diwan. So earlier what was happening in the Bengal was that there was a power struggle in the Bengal because the Nawabs they were fighting among each other, and also the company wanted to set a puppet Nawab, as I've discussed in the previous chapter. They wanted to set a puppet Nawab in Bengal, and basically initially when they came they wanted to do the business, expand their business, and that's all they wanted to do. But later on they realized that even if they set the puppet Nawab, things are not going to get better. So that is the reason they decided that now they will be becoming the Diwans. Okay, so as Diwan, the company became the chief financial administrator of the territory under its control. So the entire finance department it went under the control of the British East India Company. Now it had to think of administering the land and organizing its revenue resources. So now earlier what was happening that the Nawabs were having the sole authority over the revenue which was being collected from the Bengal. Okay, but now since the British company, East India Company, they got the Diwani rights. So what happened because of that? That they had complete control over the revenue which was being generated from the Bengal. Okay, and basically the whole idea of getting the Diwani rights was that they wanted to become a trading company who had the sole authority to ensure that it could buy the product it needed and sell it wanted. Okay, so over the years the company also learned that it had to move with some caution, because they were aware that there are already some rulers who are already ruling a particular area in the countryside. Okay, so it needed to pacify those who in the past had ruled the countryside and enjoyed the authority and prestige. Okay, so it's not like they directly went ahead and they started saying that yes, I'm going to rule over you. No, so they slowly and steadily they started interfering into the politics of the regional states, okay, or regional powers. And later on we'll see that how they started ruling the entire country. Okay, how was this to be done? Okay, so in this chapter we'll see how the company came to colonize the countryside, organize revenue resources, redefine the rights of the people, and produce the crops it wanted. Now NCERT discusses about the revenue for the company. So since the company had become the Diwan, they still saw themselves as a trader, and they wanted a larger income, revenue income, but was unwilling to set up any regular system of assessment and collection. So they never wanted to do a regular assessment or regular collection, even though they have become the Diwan, because they still saw themselves as a entrepreneur. Okay, So the effort was to increase the revenue as much as it could and buy fine cotton silk cloth as cheaply as possible. So what happened that the impact of that was that before 1865 the company had purchased goods in India by importing gold and silver from the Britain. Now the revenue collected in Bengal could finance the purchase for the good for exports. So what was happening that earlier they used to buy products at a much higher cost from the England. Now since they were having a lot of revenues, so because of that they were buying the product in Bengal and then they were exporting it to the England at the higher prices. Okay, so it was clear that Bengal economy was facing a deep crisis. Okay, so what was the crisis which were there? So like artisans were deserting villages since they were being forced to sell their goods to company at low prices. Okay, this was one of the reasons, and also we see that uh, agricultural cultivation showed the signs of collapse. And then in 1770, the famous famine which killed 10 million people in the Bengal, and it is being said that it was the bad policies of the Britishers because of which many people were killed, many children were killed in this famine, and then about one third of the population was wiped out. Okay, now the Britishers next thought of making improvement to the agriculture. Okay, so the British understood one thing, that if the economy was in ruins, could the company be certain of its revenues income? Okay, so what was a way of uh, improving the revenue? Okay, so most company officials began to feel that investment in land had to be encouraged and agriculture had to be improved. So they thought that it is from the agriculture they can generate the revenue, which was a much needed thing for the British company. Okay, so how did it happen? So what happened that in 1793 the company finally introduced a permanent settlement in 1793, and by the terms of settlement, Rajas and Talukdars were recognized as zamindars. They were asked to collect rent from the peasants and pay revenue to the company. So whatever the zamindars were having, whatever the land was there, so the Rajas and the Talukdars were asked to were recognized as zamindars, and they were asked to collect rent from the peasant. Okay, and then it was felt that this would ensure a regular flow of revenue into the company's coffers, and at the same time encourage the zamindars to invest in improving the land. Okay, so this is self-explanatory that they thought that in that way once the tax is being collected, so what will happen that something will go to the Britishers, and also it will encourage the zamindar to invest in improving the land. Now what was the problem in that permanent settlement? Okay, so basically instead of creating solutions, the permanent settlement created problems. Okay, and very soon the company official discovered that the zamindars were in fact not investing in improvement of land. The revenue that had been fixed was so high that zamindars found it difficult to pay. Okay, so obviously the revenue was fixed so high that the prices were so exorbitant that it was really difficult for the zamindars to cope up with the Britishers. Okay, now the prices in the market rose and the cultivation slowly expanded. So what happened that by the 19th century, the prices of the market slightly increased and cultivation also expanded. But now since under the previous system which I have discussed, so this meant that an increase in income of the zamindar, but no gain for the company since it could not increase the revenue demand that had been fixed permanently. So that is the reason it is known as permanent settlement, that whatever was the revenue demand that cannot be increased, cannot be decreased. It was fixed. Okay, so that became problem for the Britishers. So as long as the zamindar could give out the land to the tenants and get rent, they were not interested in improving the land. So even there was some lackluster approach from the zamindar also, that they never wanted to improve the land, because they thought that if we are going to improve the land, then these Britishers are going to charge more revenue from us and ask for more revenue from us. So it was a not win-win situation for them. So on the other hand, what happened that the rent they paid to the zamindar was high. So it's about the cultivators who actually found the system extremely oppressive. So the rent they paid to zamindar was so high, and his rights on the land was insecure. So whenever they failed to pay the rent, they were evicted from the land, and he had cultivated for generations. Now imagine if you are you or your grandfather has been tilling the land from quite a long time, and suddenly some third party comes and says that, hey, you were not able to pay the revenue for the land, so I'm going to take away your land from you. Okay, so that's where the problem was there. Okay, so that now a new system was devised. So by the early 19th century, many of the company officials were convinced that the system of revenue had to be changed again. How could revenues be fixed permanent at a time when the company needed more money to meet its expenses of administration and trade? Oh, so Britishers realized that, oh, it was a blunder, that if they fix the revenue, how will they generate more income? Okay, so this was a flawed procedure. Now, in northwestern province of the Bengal Presidency, which is now in the Uttar Pradesh, an Englishman called Holt Mackenzie devised a new system which came into effect in 1822. And what was his idea? His idea was that the village was an important social institution in North Indian society, and it needed to be preserved. So under his direction, what happened? That the collectors, they went from village to village inspecting the land, measuring the field, and recording the customs and rights of the different groups. They estimated the revenue of each plot within a village and was added up to calculate the revenue that each village mahal had to pay. So the mahal explanation is given as, in British revenue record, mahal is a revenue state which may be a village or a group of village from where they can collect the revenue. And this system came to be known as Mahalwari system. So that's all for today. We'll be discussing about the Munro system in our upcoming lectures. I hope you are enjoying the lecture, and please don't forget to share it with your friends, and please don't forget to like, subscribe and share my channel. Thank you so much.